Welcome to the D.E.A.D podcast, where I discuss all things spooky and weird. I'm Desi, and today I'll be talking about the hauntings of Anne Boleyn. Let's get started. Hey everyone, how's everyone doing tonight? I'm glad to be back. Hope everyone had a great Christmas and New Year's and all of that. Sorry about the extra long holiday break. I wasn't expecting to take such a long break. I wasn't really planning on taking a break, but the holidays just caught up to me and I didn't even get to finish all my Christmas episodes I wanted to put out. I thought about doing them and putting them out afterwards, but I said, well, I can always do them next year. So those didn't get out, but I am back with a new episode. I'm excited to get back into it after a long break. It was a struggle trying to get the motivation to get back in it. That's why I don't like to miss because I feel like I get the momentum going, and then when I stop, I like slowly lose the momentum. So I like to keep going and try not to take so many breaks. It helps me stay motivated. So, anyways, I am drinking a just a Corona tonight, keeping it simple and nothing fancy. I did get a couple of new wines for Christmas, so I'm excited to try those. But tonight I decided just to drink a beer. I am not filming at my house tonight. I am dog sitting once again. So I just kind of went with whatever was in the fridge. And I am wearing a new shirt. My mom just got it for me. I don't know if it was supposed to be for my birthday or what, but I just got it the other day. She got me a couple of shirts. But this one is perfect for Valentine's coming up. It's hilarious. So it has like a pink and silver border, and then it has like pink hearts and like bow and arrows and everything. And then it has Michael Myers in the middle holding a knife. And it says, I heard you like the silent type. Hilarious. I opened it and I died laughing. I said, oh, I am so wearing this all the way up until Valentine's. So I have that one. I have another one that's kind of Valentine's-y, so I'll wear that sometime. But yeah, so I thought that was funny. So that's what I am wearing tonight. Yeah, let's get into it. I'm going to be talking about the different hauntings of Anne Boleyn and her life and everything like that. So I'm excited to discuss this with y'all and see what y'all think about it. Let's get into it. Anne Boleyn's ghost is one of the most famous in all of Britain. She is seen regularly around Saul Church, the Tower of London, Blickling Hall, Merewell Hall, and Hever Castle. She is often seen the way she was in life, happy, young, and beautiful. But she is also seen the way she was after Henry VIII beheaded her, with her head tucked under her arm. Let's take a trip through history to learn more about Anne's life and what led up to her death. Anne was born around 1500. Her father, Sir Thomas Boleyn, was a respected courtier. Her mother, Elizabeth Howard, was the daughter of Sir Thomas Howard, 2nd Duke of Norfolk, one of the most powerful men in the country. She spent her childhood at Hever Castle in Kent. In 1513, Anne was sent to the court of Margaret of Austria and then to the French court, originally as a companion to Henry VIII's sister, Mary, who was married to Louis XII. After Louis's death in 1515, Anne stayed in France for 7 years in the household of Queen Claude, wife of the new king, Francis I. By 1522, Anne had returned to England. Anne's married sister, Mary, had become Henry's mistress and possibly remained so until 1525. Both Mary and Anne became ladies in waiting to Henry's first wife, Catherine of Aragon. In 1526, the king's interest in Anne significantly upped the stakes. Henry VIII's long marriage to Catherine of Aragon had produced only one surviving child, Princess Mary. Henry became increasingly desperate for a legitimate son and heir to secure the future of the Tudor dynasty. Don't they all? Why do they all want? Why can't a woman rule? Like, that's so stupid. Probably rule better than a man, but that's just my opinion. Anne was aware of the king's dilemma and refused to become a royal mistress and held out for the possibility of marriage. In the Vatican Library, a series of 17 letters survived which detailed Henry's growing infatuation with Anne over the next couple of years. In 1528, Anne was struck with the sweating sickness, a mysterious and often fatal virus. Henry sent his doctor to tend to her at Hever Castle. In the Tudor period, not even a king could simply decide to get a divorce. If Catherine of Aragon had quietly accepted her fate, then English history may well have turned out differently. But Catherine was a proud and pious queen who believed that her marriage to Henry VIII was a sacred institution. In 1527, the king looked for a political and legal solution. He petitioned Pope Clement VII and claimed that his marriage had never been legitimate because he had sinned in taking his brother's widow, which some scholars believed to be prohibited by the Bible. Thomas Wolsey was charged with procuring the divorce. He failed, and his own career was destroyed in the process, as the Pope refused to give in to Henry's demands. It was Anne who may have suggested a solution to the Pope's refusal to grant Henry a divorce. Driven maybe by her own reformist faith, she gave Henry a copy of William Tyndale's Obedience of a Christian Man. This book argued that the supreme authority was not held by the Pope, but by the words of God enshrined in the Bible. Henry defied the Pope and dismissed Catherine from court in 1531. Anne finally married Henry in January 1533, 7 years after their courtship began. I don't know if I would have waited that long. That's crazy. Especially in that time, they didn't live that long. I wouldn't have waited 7 years. Henry's marriage to Anne was technically bigamous, as his marriage to Catherine was not annulled until May 1533. In May of 1533, Anne was escorted by river to the Tower of London, where she prepared for her coronation in the royal apartments before riding to Westminster in a triumphant procession. Anne was crowned queen in Westminster Abbey on June 1st, when she was 6 months pregnant. Henry and Anne's first child, born on September 7th, 1533, was a healthy daughter who would grow up to become Elizabeth I. The following year, Henry broke with the Roman Catholic Church, setting himself up instead as the supreme head of what would become the Church of England. This created shockwaves, which caused religious and political unrest in Britain for the next 200 years. Unsurprisingly, Anne supported Henry's new religious and political policies, gathering around them a new team of rising courtiers, including Thomas Cromwell and Thomas Cranmer. After the birth of Princess Elizabeth, Anne and Henry had no more children. Miscarriages in 1534 and 1536 may have led Henry, who was always spiritually superstitious, to question whether he had made the right choice in marrying Anne. Henry and Anne's relationship, built on passion and expectation, became more turbulent, and Henry again began to look outside the marriage for solutions. A promising new foreign alliance with the Holy Roman Empire struggled because the Emperor Charles V refused to ratify Henry's marriage to Anne. Angry groups began to gather, led by all those courtiers who had lost their influence during the Boleyn change of regime. Anne also fell out with her ally, Thomas Cromwell, who arranged for the proceeds from the sale of the monastic property to end up in the treasury rather than be made available for charitable purposes as Anne had hoped. In 1536, Cromwell made a decisive move against Anne. Accusations of adultery and even of plotting against the king's life were leveled against the queen, her brother, and a small group of courtiers. Anne was arrested on May 2nd, 1536, and taken by barge to the Tower of London. Arriving at the private postern gate, Henry VIII, notoriously prone to suspicion and now infatuated with one of Anne's own ladies-in-waiting, Jane Seymour, ignored the Queen's pleas of innocence. A sham trial filled with Anne's enemies found her guilty, and she found herself a prisoner at the Tower of London, in the same royal apartment where, just 3 years before, she had awaited her coronation. Henry had granted her the small mercy of dying at the hands of a skilled swordsman rather than an executioner's axe. The execution of a queen for treason was an unprecedented event, and Henry and Cromwell ensured that it was carefully stage managed within the walls of the Tower, rather than at the public execution sites outside. There would still be a substantial crowd of courtiers and Tower officials and inhabitants. On May 19th, 1536, Anne was beheaded on the Tower Green. She protested her innocence until the end, but her final reported words were uncontroversial. She said, quote, "I come hither to die, for according to the law, and by the law, I am judged to die, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I pray God save the king, for a gentler nor a more merciful prince was there never." Some felt her words were laced with bitter irony, but Anne was probably considering the safety of her infant daughter Elizabeth. Anne was buried in the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula in the Tower. Henry married Jane Seymour a mere 11 days after Anne's execution. So that is a little backstory on Anne Boleyn, in case y'all didn't know. Now we are going to discuss all the places that Anne Boleyn supposedly haunts, because it's several places. The first is going to be Saul Church. According to a Norfolk legend, following her execution and burial in London, Anne's decapitated corpse was exhumed by friends and transported to Saul in the dead of night, and reburied beneath the floor of St. Peter and St. Paul Church. If true, this would explain why the ghost of the beheaded queen has been seen in the church on numerous occasions, roaming the grounds. Yet, history tells that Anne was buried at the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, where many Tower of London prisoners were buried. But it is possible in history Anne was moved. After all, Norfolk is where Anne was born and raised. The second is the Tower of London. Many sightings of Anne Boleyn have been seen at the Tower of London. This was where Anne was imprisoned and executed while Henry VIII was courting his future third wife, Jane Seymour. It would make sense that part of Anne remains in those stone walls. One of the more famous sightings was back in 1864 by military man General Dundas, who saw Anne Boleyn in the form of a ghostly white figure. She was moving towards him, feet not touching the floor, in the courtyard where she was kept prisoner before she was killed. The guard, thinking she was real, charged at her with his bayonet to ward her off, but of course to no avail, and he ended up charging straight through her ghost. Realizing this was a ghost he tried to attack, he obviously fainted. Another sighting tells of a guard that noticed lights flickering from the locked Chapel Royale. In order to deduce what could be making the lights flicker, The guard took a ladder and climbed to one of the windows to get a better look. He was met with quite a sight. In front of him was a procession of lords and ladies in centuries-old dress parading throughout the chapel, led by Anne Boleyn. He recognized her after seeing her in paintings. The ghost of Anne Boleyn is also said to be seen walking through the church near the tower, down the aisle of the church towards her grave underneath the altar. It seems that Anne is drawn to the tower, maybe because this is the place where she perished, or because this is the place where she felt the most betrayed. This next one is Blickling Hall. One of the least believable sightings of her is Blickling Hall. It is possible that Anne Boleyn would be seen here, since it is the home that she was born in and spent much of her youth, but the story connected to her ghost is what is unbelievable. It is said that at midnight, every May 19th, the day the former queen was executed, a spectral coach pulls up to Blickling. The door creaks open, and the hideous phantom of a headless woman with her head tucked underneath her arm steps out. Once Anne arrives at the hall, she is said to roam the corridors from dusk until sunrise, still clutching her head. Tradition has it that when the news of Anne's death reached Blickling in 1536, there were sightings of 4 headless horses dragging a headless man in several parts of Norfolk. This next one is Merwell Hall. Another location haunted by Anne Boleyn is Merwell Hall, the medieval Hampshire estate where Henry VIII and Jane Seymour were staying when Anne was executed. People have reported seeing Anne's restless spirit strolling about in a part of the grounds known as the Yew Tree Walk, where it is believed Henry and his bride-to-be planned their wedding. Tradition has it that Merwell was the site of a secret marriage between Henry and his third wife. So if Anne's ghost does walk among the yews because of her husband's betrayal, who could blame her? This next one is Windsor Castle. Windsor Castle, home of the current monarch, is the oldest occupied castle in the world, and some say it is also the most haunted. Though Windsor was not the primary residence of King Henry VIII, both he and Anne Boleyn spent time there. Most notably, Anne was awarded the title of Marquis of Pembroke at Windsor on September 1st, 1532. The following summer, she was pregnant, and the king decided he and his new bride would await the birth of their son at Windsor. On September 7th, 1533, Anne gave birth to a daughter who would become Elizabeth I. There have been reports of Anne's ghost at Windsor, particularly in Dean's Cloister, where she has been seen standing in a bay window, which has come to be known as Anne Boleyn's window. On one occasion, a witness claimed to have seen the headless queen running down a corridor, clutching her screaming head. This last one is Hever Castle. Hever Castle was where Anne Boleyn spent the other half of her childhood. It is also where she and her husband-to-be, Henry VIII, spent many hours courting. They could often be seen sitting underneath a large oak tree, hand in hand. With all of the fond and warm memories that Anne had of this place, it is no wonder that her ghost is often seen on the grounds and in the halls of Hever Castle. A large portion of sightings tend to happen around Christmas time. It was Anne's favorite time of year. Often she can be seen either sitting under the oak tree or walking on the bridge across Eden Lake. It is most likely Anne's spirit is at her happiest, forever in moments of heart-filled memories, before her marriage and before her death. A tourist who visited the childhood home captured a creepy image of what he claims is her ghost stalking the corridors. Liam Archer was exploring Hever Castle in Kent with his family when he took the picture, which appears to show a ghoulish hand hovering in the left hand side of the frame. He spent the afternoon taking pictures around the former home of Anne Boleyn's, including one of an ornate fireplace in a dimly lit living room in the 13th century Kent castle. But it was only when he returned home and studied the photo that he spotted what appears to be a floating hand with a long finger apparently pointing towards the chimney. Liam Archer, who did not believe in ghosts before taking this picture, definitely believes it is the spirit of the young queen, who is said to haunt the castle. He said, quote, "In the prayer room there was a fog or mist hovering around, but I did not think much of it at the time. I felt like an unknown force was pulling me through the castle. I couldn't see it, but I could definitely feel it. I didn't know what to make of it because I didn't believe in ghosts at this point, but I am now confident it is her." End quote. So that is the hauntings of Anne Boleyn, her young life, and her history as how she became queen, how she died. And it's really sad and tragic. I wanted to watch the movie. I know I watched it when it came out, but I wanted to also watch the movie for this episode. The other Boleyn girl. It has Natalie Portman and Scarlett Johansson in it. But it's like a super old movie. It's from I think 2008 or something. And I couldn't find it anywhere, and anywhere that you could find it, you had to pay for it. I'm like, why? It's like a really old movie. I don't know why it wouldn't just be somewhere to watch. So that kind of sucked, but I did want to watch it. So yeah, let me know what y'all think. Let me know, have you heard of Anne Boleyn? Did you know the story about her? Did you know about all these hauntings? Have you been to any of these places? I would love to know. Let me know. Send me a DM, send me. That brings me to the end of this episode. Thanks for listening to the Dead Podcast. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at the Dead Podcast. Also, feel free to send in your stories, episode suggestions, or feedback at the Dead Podcast one at gmail.com, or send me a DM on Instagram. If you enjoyed this show, please rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you are listening on, and be sure to come back next week for my next episode.